whisper something happy in my ear. Just a sedative to make me disappear. I am so tired of seeing love.
1 past 10 now. They're still live with this fifth edition of the Fund Distribution Breakfasts. We've been together for an hour. We've still got an hour ahead of us. We're halfway of this web conference. We've structured the different roundtables with the regulatory framework. We were very clear about it. We talked about products. Now let's talk about the interest of investors for sustainable funds and the behavior of investors on the different markets. And we start with you, Jean-François. Hello, David. You're the general manager of Contalis. You have some figures to give us about the relative trends in terms of marketing of ESG funds in France and in Europe, and about this appetite of investors for such funds. Yeah, I'm here to give you figures. Thank you for your invitation. I will relate to what Philippe Furlade said. He talked about skyrocketing. At Contalis, we talk about a green wave or tsunami that floods all of the markets, even though, well, in a percentage, it's a small share. Well, 2 years ago, it was 600 billion euros of assets under management. We are at 1,000 billion today. It's 15% of the sector that switched to ISR, or socially responsible investment. At the European level, we will reach 20% in a few years' time. So that's a quarter of assets managed in Europe as ISR. So there's a switch. It was confidential, institutional a little time ago. Now it's become mainstream. There's a switch also in a complicated environment. There were 300 billion collected in 2020, 200 billion for monetary funds. It was difficult, yeah, but it's a lot of money collected for ISR, that is socially responsible investment. ISR being a French standard. It's 70 billion of funds collected for ISR. So it means it's decollection from traditional funds. Investors have withdrawn capital from non-ISR funds to invest into ISR funds, which explains the tsunami. It's not just a natural collection, it's related to a decollection from traditional funds, or at least non-ESG or SRI funds. Yes, and it is also very quick, very violent, it's brutal. It's like a meteorite that's just impacted our ecosystem. So it's a true green wave that impacts all of the ecosystem. The ecosystem we can see in collection, it is running well, and ISR funds are quite successful. It's also for reasons of performance. We talked with Guillaume Monguet earlier and Robeco about it. In the last 3 years, it's plus 2% of performance of supplementary performance of ISR funds in comparison with non-ISR funds, and with a rate of risk that is lower. It depends on the sector, though. Yeah, the other element that is interesting is also switch towards an offer that has got more and more of an impact. That is, sometimes you've got ISR funds, or in broad terms, because they include ESG criteria. But more and more, management companies and investors, and we have that in the quantitative figures, do not want global ISR, it's plus 7% of collection this year, but they want environment, that's plus 26%. They don't want necessarily best in class. They want impact and theme, plus 35% for themes. The first three, that's double, multiplied by two for renewable energy. It's huge. Number two is climate. Number three is tech and ESG. That is investments in digital, technological securities. Other elements also explain the switch. It was very confidential, very institutional. Now it is becoming retail. First figure, financial advisors, 15% of the portfolios managed and advised by Quantilis. 15% of our assets are invested by private investors in ESR funds. So it's not only institutional investors, but also private banking. Another element to have a link with Philippe Dutertre is that life insurance is a very important vehicle, in France. People invest in life insurance. 100% of life insurance contracts have got ISR funds. It's, well, you're going to tell me it's obligatory, it's been obligatory since the 1st of January. Yes, but still 25% of account units in the 600 life insurance contracts that we've got that have got ISR funds in them. So through life insurance already there's a satisfactory offer in terms of sustainable investment. Another element to conclude, and it is what I was saying with the change of the sector, retail customers adhere to that storytelling. Management companies have got to be more and more involved and have more and more specific offers. And there's that commitment, that granularity that is more, that is stronger and stronger to ensure the link between my investments and the financing, the need for financing. Maybe you saw on the Paris marketplace, it is in favor of McPhee, Voltalia, and Schneider Electric in hydrogen, and not as much for fossil securities, ESSO, Total. That's a big mess for oil securities. So there's a true commitment of the sector. So is there a COVID effect? Well, there is obviously a COVID effect. There's an effect of particular acceleration. There's also a movement that was structural. In 2008, it was 600 billion. In 2019, 800 billion. So it's increased, even though in 2019, in the beginning of the year, we didn't know about COVID. Thank you, Jean-François. Philippe Dutertre for AG2R La Mondiale, who's going to tell us about the interest of investors for such sustainable investment products. What do you think about this green wave, this green tsunami, including in life insurance in France? What do you think about it? Philippe Dutertre. This is live. I saw you before. Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. We can see you now. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. About 46 years ago, René Dumont was candidate to the presidential election, and he offered to me a glass of water to say, one day we'll lack water. In 87, Midnight Oil made a call on the theme is on the same thing. In 2002, Jacques Chirac told me about this burning house. I've listened to Jean-François, and I feel that this call has been heard at a time in 2020 when precisely responsible investment seems to finally meet its public. especially within the framework of the Pact law. So how to make sure that that meeting be successful, that it is not the meeting of the sun with the moon, like an old French singer used to sing. So the Pact law, that's the obligation to have on the shelves responsible products, green products. It started in January 2020 with the prospect that is such that in 2022
Yeah.
we've lost the sound. So, okay, you're back. And insurance companies are observed. There was a recent report published by the French Federation of Insurance on the occasion of Climate Finance Day. Well, insurers are investors. They are long-term institutional investors. They're also distributors of savings solutions. There are 92 billion of green investments, plus 50% in comparison with last year. And with account units at the end of 2019, it was 25 billion euros of account units that were green or responsible or that showed solidarity. I moderate with an FFA working group focused on ESG and climate issues, and the campaign of 2019 and 20 was dedicated to that matter of life insurance, of a green, responsible life insurance. In that regard, we published at the end of June, early July, a guide to help investors structure their investments with an offer that corresponds to the Pact law. It was the opportunity to listen to Jean-François talking about the offer that he bears. What are the main lessons drawn for that meeting to be successful 10 years ago? Well, the thing is that advisors were unable to talk about a product of sustainable development. It was a failure at the time. So we had to build a legible offer, legible by all of the chain links, advisors at the end customers. So that was very important. And
Yeah, on a reperdu Philippe.
we've lost Philippe Dutertre again. So we don't sell account units anymore. So, but there was a great need for training, for educating people. I would like, I hope you still can hear me, I'd like to share with you a dream. In 87, people considered that things were okay, for lack of a better solution. Now green is good because it's the right solution. This is what I wanted to share with you.
Green is good aujourd'hui.
Yeah, green is good today.
Non, Philippe. Non, et on finit là-dessus juste sur l'investissement de conviction.
And what about conviction investment? What is the trend? What about investors that really have got an
Peut-être que je
interest
vais devoir poser la question. Peut-être qu'on a perdu.
in. Oh, maybe we've lost
On
Philippe.
continue avec Laurent Jacquier,
Let's
La Forge
continue with
pour La Française.
Laurent Jacquier for La
Là,
Française.
Laurent Jacquier,
Is he
La
with
Forge,
us?
donc,
Laurent
Global Head of,
Jacquier, La Forge,
Sustainable Investing,
Global Head of Sustainable Investing for La Française.
Investissement durable.
What about the future of
Est-ce que vous êtes là,
sustainable
Laurent
investment?
Jacquier,
Are you
La Forge? On est
with
en
us,
direct,
Laurent
10h16,
Jacquier? We're live.
Matinale, 5e édition des
10:16, fifth edition of fund distribution
Quoi.
breakfasts. Are you with us? Yes, I'm with you. I hope you can hear me. Yes, we
Vous en pensez
can.
quoi par rapport à ce que vous avez entendu
Well,
jusqu'à
what do you
présent?
think?
C'est quand même beaucoup de choses. Sur les lendemains
You've
de
been listening to
l'investissement durable,
what's
sur,
been
est-ce
said
qu'il y a un
about
changement de
the future of
paradigme, est-ce qu'il y a une
sustainable
accélération
investment. Is
d'histoire,
there a change of
puis,
paradigm?
je crois qu'on puisse un jour mesurer les effets
And
réels
one
de
day
tout ça
we'll
quand
have
même
to be
sur,
able
sur la vraie vie,
to
sur l'économie,
measure
sur
the
le
true
changement.
effects on
Merci de faire
true
un-
life, on climate change.
Alors, si votre question c'est
Well,
est-ce
if
qu'il y a
your question
un
is
changement de paradigme,
there a change of
oui,
paradigm?
Alors,
We've lost Mr.
ce changement de paradigme
Jacquier
a lieu,
is
c'est
back with us.
simplement
So this
on a
change of
trois
paradigm
raisons
has taken
principales,
place
une excellence de performance.
because there are three main reasons.
on vous a au niveau du son, pas de l'image, mais on a le son, ce qui est déjà
Bon,
ça.
d'accord.
On comprend.
A
L'image,
performance
ça y est, allez-y.
requirement.
Option radiophonique. Oui, je disais qu'il y avait principal.
We've lost him again.
Non, là, pour le coup, on vous a perdu. Je sais pas ce qu'il faut qu'on fasse là.
Don't know
On
what
retente.
should be done. Let's try again.
Laurent
Or
Jacquier Laforge.
Laurent Jacquier Laforge for La
Il faut couper
Française.
votre caméra, me dit-on.
Maybe
votre caméra qu'on
switch
s'en
off your
sert juste,
camera so that
Juste
we've got the audio
C'est la
only.
demande.
It should
Voilà.
work better.
Allez-y.
La deuxième raison, c'est la demande.
So the second
Et,
reason
je
is
crois qu'on a démontré assez bien,
demand.
Philippe
We've
vient encore de parler,
demonstrated, and Philip just talked
autant
about
par la
it.
réglementation, par la demande spontanée du public, il y a une
There-
véritable vague, et c'est
There's a
ces
true
statistiques
wave
que
in
vous
terms
donnez au
of
début de ce
public
plateau.
demand.
Et puis enfin, la réglementation,
And
elle est
finally,
puissante.
regulation
Et
is very
sans cette
powerful.
réglementation,
And without this
cette
regulation,
révolution n'aurait pas lieu.
that revolution wouldn't
Ça, c'est le
take place.
pourquoi la vague est là.
This turnaround.
Maintenant,
That's
nous,
the
en tant
reasons
que
for the wave.
société de
Now,
gestion, ça
we
requiert
as a
une
management
adaptation,
company,
rapide et
it
violente.
requires a
En ce
strong
qui nous
and
concerne,
quick
on a
adaptation.
démarré ça en 2008
We
avec une étape
started in
importante en
2008 with a
2014
strong
en montant un
step in
centre de recherche
2014. We
lié au-
set
tout
up
ce qui
a
est
research
société
center
durable.
about sustainable
C'est un travail énorme,
products.
et Marie
It is a
Papillon
huge
parlait
work,
ce
and Marie-Pierre
matin
Pillon was talking about it this
sur
morning.
la requête des données, leur
About
formatage, leur mise en forme.
the
Et puis,
requests, their
c'est la mise en
formatting,
place, la
and
mise en
it
place
is
de produits qui sont
the
adaptés.
setting up of
Et encore
products
une
that
fois, je
are
ne pense qu'il y
adapted.
aura
And once again,
pas d'investissement
I don't
rentable
believe
qui soit
that
durable,
there
mais,
will
on peut
there
prendre aussi
still
la
can
place
be
dans le
profitable
sens, c'est-à-dire
investment
qu'il est
that is not
inconcevable
sustainable.
de
It
lever
is
le
also
caractère
impossible to
sans
think that
s'assurer qu'il est associé à une bonne
um,
rentabilité de l'épargne qui nous est confiée. Ceci
it
étant
could be
vrai
the
pour toutes les classes
case
d'actifs,
in the
en ce qui
future.
me concerne,
And
en
it's
tant
true for
qu'État,
all
évidemment,
categories of
c'est
assets.
une
Half of
règle.
our
Et sur
assets
ces
are
sujets
in
aussi,
real
qui
estate.
sont un tout petit peu marginaux, dont on discute aujourd'hui,
And for
la
those
dimension
subjects
durable
that can be
est
marginal,
devenue,
the
est
sustainable
devenue essentielle.
aspect has
Donc,
become
voilà
essential,
pour
even in real estate.
la première partie.
So
Donc,
that's for the first
sur
part.
le changement de paradigme,
So
sans
change
aucun
of
doute,
paradigm, yes,
avec
undoubtedly.
ensuite, en
With
matière de rentabilité
in terms of
et
profitability,
d'évolution habituelle, c'est-à-dire que le
usual
problème
developments.
n'est pas tellement le
That is
statut d'une
the
société,
problem
est-ce
is
qu'elle
not
est
the
propre
status of a
ou
company. Is it
pas
clean
assez
or
ou
not,
trop carbonée.
or
La
too,
question est,
to,
est-ce que les choses
does it have too
évoluent
much
dans
of
le
a
bon
carbon
sens?
footprint?
C'est-à-dire
The
que, en
idea
fait,
is to
le
know
problème,
whether
c'est moins
things
est-ce
are
que c'est régulé
evolving in the
politiquement
right
pour être
way.
mauvais, mais plutôt ce qui
It's not
s'améliore
about
ou ce qui
sorting
se
the
détériore.
good
Et
and the
c'est
bad,
en
but
général dans cette condition et sur
sorting
cette
those that
condition
are progressing
qu'on peut
and
aller chercher une
those that are
performance qui va pouvoir
deteriorating.
associer à cette évolution. C'est pour ça que au centre de notre
That's why
démarche,
at
il
the
y a la notion
center,
de
at the core of
transition. Et c'est bien
our
aussi pour
approach,
ça
there's
que
this notion of
il y a
transition. That's why
beaucoup d'intérêt pour
there's
la
a
dette
lot of
verte qui
interest,
se présente
of
aujourd'hui,
interest for the
probablement
ISR,
moins
French
d'intérêt pour les
ISR
labels
label,
strictement verts.
and
On a
not
évoqué
as
tout
much
à l'heure,
for
on a parlé
strictly
de
green
Greenfield, et puis
labels. We
Philippe
talked
Sonnaz
about
parlait de
Greenfield, and Philippe
l'écolabel.
Sonnaz was
Il
talking
faut
about
bien
the eco
comprendre
label.
que si on est
One's got to
déjà 100%
understand that
vert aujourd'hui,
if we are
le
100%
potentiel
green today, the
d'amélioration est
potential for
relativement faible. Donc il
progress
faut
is low.
financer la transition
So
énergétique.
we've
Il y a
got
beaucoup
finance,
d'autres
energy
sujets.
transition,
Il
there's
faut
no doubt
s'occuper
about it,
aussi
but we've
de
got
ceux qui
also to
sont
deal with
les moins vertueux
those
dans
that are the
l'entreprise, qui
least
sont engagés
virtuous
sur
today,
la voie
but that are
d'une
committed to
amélioration dans la situation,
the
par exemple, en matière
improvement
d'émissions
of their situation in termes of carbon emissions.
On peut parler aussi d'un autre sujet
We
qui n'a
can
pas
also
été
talk about
abordé
another subject
jusqu'à
that's not
présent.
been addressed yet.
On a parlé des
We've
produits
talked
à
about
connotation de transition.
transition products, green products. I think we've got to talk also about, in a more systematic way, about the allocation of assets. Why? It's true for institutional investors, but also for retail customers that, invest their savings for sometimes 8 years for fiscal reasons. But also, once the allocation is done, it doesn't move very much. But whereas we know that the allocation of assets is the main driver of performance, far ahead of the selection of the funds themselves. And for us, the issue of climate change related to greenhouse effect gases lays that question of the allocation. It sheds a light on the need for very long durations. When we talk about very long term, it's sometimes it's necessary to have 80 years to measure the effect. And this strategic allocation is based on economic assumptions that are related to the observation of history. But if there's a change of paradigm, you've got to imagine approaches that do not take into account history, but that take into account future scenarios. We are finances, people have worked before us, the GIEC. There are scientific scenarios. Those scientific scenarios have been analyzed by university academic people, Nobel Prizes in terms of social and economic impact that gives different capacity to react to this climate change. It's important climate change because the questions of governance and equality between men and women, they are second to the issue of being able to breathe. It is a central issue, and it is what makes, when I look at your statistics, the perception that investors have got of the importance of sustainable funds and sustainable finance, because it is a vital question. That's why many investors, including retail investors, are more and more interested in that theme. So, according to us, we don't have the answers to all of those questions. It is rather new, and once again, it's not about looking at the past anymore, because there's this change of paradigm. So we've got to test different scenarios, the capacity of countries to cooperate, hence the importance of the presidential American elections, and can they cooperate according to rules set by the UN, or will there be a competition between countries? And in the same way, let's not forget that last growth cycle was 50 years ago, since the end of World War II. It associates, the price of energy and the availability of energy. If we go from fossil kind energy to renewable energy, we understand that, geopolitical matters are not the same, and the allocation of assets has got to be changed also. And finally, it's a real change of paradigm. It's a way of answering your question. Thank you, Laurent Jacquier-Laforge. It's 10:24. There's a question about, is there dependency of the marketing of sustainable funds on the sector of insurance? Yes, of course, considering the mass of capital at stake. There are two different approaches. There's a regulatory, and I am obliged since the 1st of January. It's marginal. It's a small percentage of funds. Now I've got 1 or 2 account units that are green. The main part, that 60%, that represents about 25% of units where there are true commitments to responsible offer. And I would take advantage of this to talk about the future of ESG, because if everybody switches to ISR funds, what is going to happen? Well, we shouldn't be mistaken. We shouldn't take the wrong stance. It's just like organic products. They're either organic or they are not. And for ISR, it's the same. There are investors that hate warm water. They want hot water with funds that are more and more committed. Insurers, investors, distributors, the whole chain will have to follow towards hotter and hotter funds, more and more precise funds. For me, that's the future of ISR. And in relation to what Mr. Fouquier-Laforge said, there will be an impact on all classes of assets. Well, there will be a switch towards diversified funds that are for mainly the core of the portfolio of households. Real estate also. We could talk about private equity. In BPI offer, is it ISR? So it's all of the categories of assets that will have to position themselves. Once again, we are lagging behind, but it's for a good cause. Thank you, General Manager of Continuous and Longequier-Laforge and Philippe Dutretre. We'll have a small break, and then after the break, we'll have a last debate about the behavior